Hello and welcome to Andy and Ian Talk Networking. I am Andy,
And I'm Ian.
and welcome everybody to another really insightful discussion. And Ian, this week I think we should talk about the elephant in the room, that is, are packets the single or the source of truth in network observability and security operations? So this one's I mean, you could just say the answer is yes, and that would be kind of the
This
end of the
is
meeting with it.
this
So,
is the most
okay, well, thanks everybody for
emphatic.
watching.
This is the most emphatic yes there is. Now, once again, it does get a tiny bit nuanced, but the answer is yes. Packets are that source of truth that you, if you're a network ops, SecOps, whoever kind of person, if you're using some other kind of source of truth, oh my goodness, we need to talk.
So let's talk about the kind of different options that you've got available then. So obviously we talked about network observability. We talked about the packet broker, packet capture. We talked about all the tools that people are using to kind of analyze and look at what's going on inside their network. But ultimately what's actually happening in the network is you're capturing packets on the wire, using your tap or your span. You're bringing that up in through your packet broker. You're doing some filtering and post processing, and then you're feeding that into your capture. And really, kind of it goes in two ways now. So you've got all of these packets, hopefully all of these packets at a 100% captured in your packet store, and you've got some kind of metadata that has been processed within your packet capture, assuming you've got a decent packet capture solution that's generating all of this kind of metadata. Why isn't that good enough, Ian? Come on, tell me why can't I just live with the metadata?
Well, I I think the point is, Andy, that you have made a lot of assumptions about the people who are listening to this little episode today. And once again, rightly so, because it's based on all of the things that we've said on the last number of episodes. I do wonder whether this is going to fall into two conversations, to be honest. But the thing is that the big question that I think we need to start with is, are people believers in packets? Because it could be the case, it
Yeah.
could be, and it has been. I've spoken with many folks, particularly at trade shows, not usually kind of customer calls, so to speak, but usually at the trade shows, and they don't believe in packets.
Really.
So yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely,
So
they
I'm always
don't,
the other way
they don't
around. To
believe.
me, the packet is like, it doesn't matter what the tools are telling me. If the packet's telling me this is what's gone on the wire.
Yeah, but that's a great fact, Andy, and that shows that you are a little ahead in one
I've
sense or
got a big
another,
head.
right?
So,
Well, the point is that, people will say to me, well, it's okay, Ian, this is all well and fine, and I really appreciate everything you're telling me, but I'm using SNMP to
right.
get statistics out of my switches and routers. Or I'm looking at the log data, which obviously was an
Yeah.
aspect I think that we mentioned at the start. And the funny thing is that, you know, as I said, everyone is obviously building their networks for whatever they're trying to do. But what you don't get is you don't get a full grasp of what's going on. I mean, I think you just
Yeah.
said it a second ago. If the packet's not telling you the thing that you believe it should be,
Yeah.
then you can see immediately that something's going wrong. Whereas if I'm using something like, and I'm picking on SNMP, right? I've written my fair set of SNMP tools and MIBs back in the day. Right, the bottom line is then you're only getting a tiny fraction. You're getting averages of averages.
Yeah.
You're getting, well,
So
what
you're
if
getting a snapshot.
it loops a
Yeah.
tiny little snapshot,
Yeah.
and that's very, very limiting. And the same with even logs. And as I say, every bit of data has its place,
Yeah.
but logs are written by software developers, right? And those logs are, well, I think this is not going to happen, so I'll put a log in here. Oh,
Yeah.
I
That,
think
that's
this
that's an
will
interesting
happen.
one because I mean, to me, I mean, when I write code, generally, what you're doing is saying, I think something's going to go wrong here, so I'm going to put a comment or I'm going to
Yeah,
dump something into the log file. Okay,
yeah.
great. So as a developer, you think something's going to go wrong there, so therefore you put it. Well, what about all the places you didn't think something was going to go wrong? Yeah. So, you know, and you know, we talk about this all the time. This is the, you know, the definition of the known knowns, and the,
Yeah,
but really what people want to know about is the unknown unknowns. So, you know,
yeah,
the logs are great at finding the known knowns. So I think something's going to go wrong. I'm going to put something in there and it's going to be captured in log. Great. All you've done is you've identified something that the developer thinks is probably going to go wrong at some point in the future. But I want to know about the stuff that he didn't think was going to go wrong, because ultimately those are the ones that are going to be the most difficult to debug. They're going to be the most difficult to reproduce, and they're going to be almost impossible to find unless you've got, guess what, all the packets.
and this is I mean, this is the whole point. This is why this conversation could easily extend, right? The point being that you wrote the code, or I mean, let's speak in the very positive sense,
Yeah,
right? You write the code, you put the log entries in there. Oh, I didn't. Hey, why didn't that trigger? Well, actually, the packet that you wanted to see, the connection that you wanted to see, was dropped all the way back here in the network.
yeah,
It never actually made it to the machine, and therefore you're saying, well, hey, my code is perfect because that log
yeah.
file
Or my
isn't triggering, or
application,
my
or yeah,
application.
whatever.
But actually, something went wrong with a particular type of packet, maybe coming
Yeah,
from a particular browser, or something happened way, way back in the
yeah.
network and actually never made it to your application. So there's lots of very important points with that. But actually, let's talk about the negative side. In theory, if I've got the packet data, let's say I've got my packet capture system, it's stored everything away. That's everything. That's assuming it's a good
Yeah,
packet
the
system that
full
captured
conversation as well.
really,
Yeah,
yeah, the full conversation.
yeah,
The point is in those log files, right? I mean, in theory, they can be edited, they can be lost, there can be lots of
yeah.
issues with, shall we say, that very high level kind of logging type pieces. Whereas the packet data that's buried away in the data center on some secure file system, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty difficult to start editing, and things like that.
Well,
So
well,
it's,
I mean, it's almost impossible because a lot of the times the payloads may be encrypted,
yeah.
but it doesn't stop you from looking at the conversation. You can see, you know, your ACKs and your syncs and all this kind of stuff going on between the client and the server. But you know, the actual data inside it may be, you know, encrypted if it's on an SSL or something. But again, there could be other things that are going on there. So you know, quite often when I look at our dashboards and I look at stuff that's going on, I'm looking at, you know, this particular application suddenly switched to a TLS 1.0, and that's now getting dropped in the network. So again, if you don't have the full packet where you can see the negotiation and the handshaking and all the toing and froing between the application, you really have no idea what's going on. You just might get a single flag in a log that says, you know, handshake failed. Okay, great, but why? Why did the
Yeah,
handshake? What?
why?
Why? It's all well and good knowing, you know, the kind of one aspect, but you need to know the what, the why, the when, and the where of exactly what happened during that negotiation. And the only thing that's going to give you that, unfortunately, is the packets, I think.
Once again, you're never going to get me
Preaching
to
to the choir.
disagree on that. We are on violent agreement
Yeah,
on this very topic, Andy. Because, but as I say, I've met a lot of folks. They'll say, "Well, hey, packet data is outdated," or
yeah,
"We don't need that. We've got all." I mean, the point is that log data and application-centric kind of information clearly has its place. It
yeah,
does have. I mean,
absolutely. Yeah,
I'm not kind of disparaging it in that sense. But the point is, if you're not able to fill in the real understanding of what's going on, using the packets, using the conversation, all the things you said, pulling out the certificate types, where they get dropped in the network, using different monitoring points to see where things are getting
yeah.
dropped in different middle boxes,
Latencies. Yeah,
latencies, all of those. If you're not looking at all of those steps, you're not going to get the full picture. So yeah, you might need we often use the term melt, right? Metrics, events, logs, and
yeah,
traces, right? Kind of sitting right at the top. And I like to talk about that as an iceberg. That's the bit of
yeah,
the iceberg that you
yeah,
can see, but the packet data is the bit of the iceberg that's really important,
yeah.
but it's under the water. It's not quite as visible
Yes.
unless you're that netops type of person in, looking at the packet
Yeah,
data, looking at what's going through the broker, etc., etc. I'm
yeah.
sure we've run pretty long on this call so far. Maybe we need to try and kind of pull out a few more nuances in the next one, Andy. But
Yeah.
as I say, there's so much data available in the packets, right?
Yeah.
Exactly as you said. In the logs, yeah, I will say it, there's data to be had there. But if you just say, I'm only going to do logs, only,
You're
that's
missing
all I'm
half of it.
going to do, you're missing a critical
Yeah.
part of
Yeah.
understanding really what's going on. And similarly, if you go back one step again and you say, well, actually, I'm not caring about any of this observability, visibility, whatever word you want to use. I'm just using a little bit of SNMP to kind of hold
Yeah.
things together. That's a very limiting situation. It's going to be very, very difficult to be able to provide comprehensive information,
Yes.
shall we say, when the big red phone, I don't suppose people have those anymore, but the big red phone on
Big
your
red email.
desk
Yep.
rings and says, why is it not working? It's going to be a long, long journey to get to
Yep.
the answer unless you're dealing with an extremely small network. But I'm sure if you're listening to this conversation, you're probably dealing with a much larger, much more complicated, potentially hybrid
Yep.
kind of environment where you need to add, if you're not doing it today, you need to add packet data. Once again, from cPacket, from other vendors, doesn't matter. I'm encouraging
Yeah.
you to use
Absolutely.
packet data
Yeah.
to be able to help answer your questions, because when that big red phone rings, you want to be able to say, this is the problem. I can
Yeah.
see it here. It's in this application. Somebody changed something on the router. It's dropping these packets. Whatever the excuse, whatever the example, bottom line is packets are that single source of truth, and I would strongly encourage
Yeah.
you to use them.
No, and I think you're right. I think there are things, places in the network where you can use logs, you can use, the metadata, you can use melt, they're all great. But ultimately, if you want to get to that root cause, you are
Yeah.
definitely going to need to get that. And the tools are getting better, but so are the applications getting more complicated. If you start looking at AI platforms and AI, clusters, the amount of data that's flowing forwards and backwards through that cluster as the handshaking takes, but you are not going to debug that with a melt or with a syslog file. So it's just kind of my last takeaway thought there is, but I absolutely agree. I think realistically there are different use cases, but ultimately if you want to get to that resolution as quickly as possible, you are probably going to end up looking into some source of the packets at some point.
And I think you just, even in that last little comment, Andy, I think you just wrote down three different titles for the next
next
three of
10
these
weeks, yeah.
conversations.
Yeah, no,
Bottom line
absolutely.
is, you're completely right. It's really been great for everyone to be listening. Fantastic.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Ian. Let's thank everybody for watching and appreciate your feedback. Please don't forget to like and subscribe below. Appreciate the subs and the people who do so. Again, please leave us comments in the comment section for future topics. Like us to carry on discussing about AI clusters and things like that. We'll be more than happy to do that in maybe one of the upcoming calls. So appreciate your time. Once again, I have been Andy.
And I've been Ian.
Thanks everybody for watching.
Bye for now.